What is up, guys? Welcome back to Rinsing Wrecked. Still jamming away on the moped, so we finished up the cylinder case and the cylinder porting on the Polini Garelli build. Now, I'd like to get this thing back to a roller. So we got the tires and tubes. We need to get rolling on actually assembling the wheels and the hubs and the axles and all the other fun stuff here. So hopefully I remember how to do that, because there's a lot of parts on here. These are not the original Garelli wheels that came on it. This is an extra set of Italian wheels that I had upstairs on a Malaguti, maybe? I don't remember exactly. I think it came off of a Malaguti parts bike. So they're 16-inch mags. Typically the Italian stuff, in my experience, is usually run 16s. Pooks, Motobicanes, Hobbits. The rest of them are 17-inch wheels, so 16-inch mags, but they were complete wheels, so everything on this was a complete wheel assembly when I took them apart. Worst case scenario, we've got a stock set of the spokers that are still completely assembled, so we have a quick reference if need be, as well as parts to kind of interchange, as long as the brake plates are the same, but the axles and all of that should be okay. So these are all freshly blasted, cleaned up, and coated. Daddy went a little nuts on the brake plates, you know, lots of colors everywhere. So let's throw you guys up on the tripod. I'll dig out the bags of bearings and parts. I think it was all loose balls on this, if I remember correctly, when I took it apart. Get you guys set up and we'll start slapping some wheels together. Well, I thought I grabbed the front, but we have a rear first. So how do you tell? Well, flat flange for the sprocket here. Now, here's the sprocket. I might actually do a quick tooth count on this just so I kind of know where we're at for gearing. Yeah, let me count that, and I'm going to Sharpie it on there. She's probably going to want to Scotch-Brite or clean up the outer plate. The sprocket's in good shape itself, but I feel like she's going to want this a little cleaner. I'm going to get yelled at if I put this on dirty. All right, so cleaned up the sprocket. We got a 28 tooth on this sprocket, which is actually pretty... How'd that work? The factory one, I just went through and counted. I got a 32 rear on the back of there. This is a 28. So this will give me more top end, and I got a 10 tooth front. Now, my only concern is, am I going to be able to get the clutch to slip enough to utilize a 28 rear? I feel like that's a little on the low side, but I think we're going to try it. Hopefully, it's got enough power to pull on takeoff, and the new rubber clutch allows it to slip long enough without overheating and melting and locking everything up. So I don't know. The 32 I can definitely run without having to worry about swapping out the chain, but for now I ran a 10, or we can always change the front sprocket too. I just don't have any. I'd have to order like a bigger front. Gearing. It's fun. We're gonna run it just as is, and then we'll make tweaks and changes down the line. But if we're shooting for 50, this has a much better likelihood of us getting there. So I'm gonna go full speed ahead and then probably regret it at a later point in time, but that is what it is. Can't really know until it's actually back together and running. So basically, sprocket's gonna drop on like so. The nuts actually lock into the backside on the other side of the wheel. And I gotta clean this up now too. What if we just, I'll clean up the lock plate and the heads of the bolts. When those are done, we'll drop this back on. Both heads are cleaned up. Let me just wipe them down real quick. So you got sprocket goes onto the wheel, then a little lock ring that folds over once these are in and tightened down. And I didn't have to clean up the nuts, obviously, because they are gonna go on the backside. So if we look down here, oh, these aren't grooved. This is gonna be fun. Nut goes in. I'll show you guys what this looks like in a second. Just get a couple threads started here. So they're not a full recess, but there is a flat on the back to lock this nut in place. Doesn't help with having to get them started though. Fingers are too big. Not the best for people with small hands. Lost a mic. Quality entertainment right now. How many tries does it take to thread a nut on a bolt? So we got these started at least. Now, if you look down here, we have that little flat tab is going to lock the nut in place. So what I'm going to do now is actually kick this back up and try and get these to seat where they line up. And then we'll grab a 10 mil and snug these down. Or an 11 mil maybe. Just kidding. The only thing is we do need to make sure that the nut on the backside does seat into that groove. Which we did not. That did. So make sure the flat of the nut actually does line up where it's supposed to. So I think what I'm going to do is just drive these in a little. Okay, so the nuts are tightened down now, so make sure you line up the flats on the inside of that. That's going to hold the, or lock the nut in place so it doesn't spin on you. So the sprocket is now back on. Now we get to start playing around with the bearings. So I did bag all the front and rear wheel stuff, along with the axle parts, which also need to get cleaned up. And I don't feel like scrubbing all of these. I just got to get into the actual studs and spacers and things. So zip tied all of those together just to keep them sorted. So I'll just kind of make a pile and start yanking parts out of here. Now with the, it's kind of a weird design. This is your axle, obviously. Show you guys what this looks like real quick. So we'll pop this nut off. Should probably check the brake arms and things first too, but here's your drum brake assembly. On this is going to drop in here like so. Then we have all of these spacers. So the axle is going to go through. Come on. The axle will go through the drum brake section. This is what's going to be with the bearing adjuster. So it's fully floating. It's jam nutted together, so you separate this if you need to shift the axle left or right. This drops in here. And then you got a bunch of the bearings that go into the cup down here. And basically a ton of spacers, a ton of little parts for adjustment, and a lot of jam nut assemblies. Let me start slapping this together. So on most bigger bikes, you got your bearing so that pound into here, and then a spacer in between. Since this is a ball setup, there is no spacer in between. So we got the bearing cups. I'm going to pound these in first. These are not visible, so I don't really care about cleaning those up. We got the bearing shield. The cups go back in. Now, I gotta find the loose balls and some grease. So we're gonna grease up this section. It's kind of a pain because if you don't have the axle in, there's nothing to hold these bearings in place to stop them from dropping out other than the bearing cage itself. All the bearings got pushed into the bottom corner of that Ziploc bag. I didn't think I had all of them. Made me nervous. So now we have freshly greased roller bearings in here. Then you got a seal cover. Which just tap this in gently. And we'll drop the axle in which is going to come in this way. Trying to figure out which way these all lay out. I apologize. Did not do a very good job taking all of this apart, so separate these so we just have bare axles. And we'll leave the brake plate side for the other one. Let me check the other wheel. Actually, it's nice having two here. I don't remember which side the axle protruded out more of. Okay. The long side goes to the brake plate. So I was right the first time, which means all of this needed to happen on the other side first. So flip her over. Let me grease these bearings again. We'll be back once I get that done. Bearings are in, seals are in. And this will go in this way. And I did not change the adjusters on here. So now that I got that one in, what we're going to do is come over to the other side and put the adjuster back in. And this is basically your preload. So crank this down. And then the two tapered ends basically are going to pinch together. And we lock it down where we want it with the jam nut. Coming up on the end of it now. Now right here, the axle should free spin. So right now it's definitely binding, which means we're way too tight. Since the other side is already jam nutted and locked, I'm not going to tweak that one too much, but you can feel the notch. I know you guys can't, but I can feel the notchiness on each of these rotations. I back this off just a quarter turn. There we go. Nice smooth wheel. So then we get to put our jam nut assembly back on. I might still have to play with this because these are not the original wheels for the bike. I gotta get a real skinny wrench in here to snug these two down. Hopefully I got something for that. Come on. Oh, in luck. Don't know what furniture that these parts just came through with, but it's a skinny cheapo wrench and it's exactly the right size. That never happens. A little tight. So this is where it gets a little tedious. You kind of gotta go by feel. I'm tightening these two jam nuts together, not tightening the axle. So right there. Nice and smooth, spins good, feels good. No excess notchiness or drag. So there we have it. That side should be good to go. Then we still have a chain adjuster and the outer nut. It'll sit just like this when it goes back onto the bike. So then if we come back over to the brake plate side, here, this will drop in. Like so. Spacer, big nut. And hopefully these line up. So definitely a lot of trial and error right now just because we're trying to get the wheel assembled. I don't have it mounted in the frame and I didn't have the axles here. Before, when we did a rough mock-up, we just held it together with a screwdriver. But this should kind of get us close. So I might have to pop this apart and shift the axle one way or another, which means breaking all the jam nuts and adjusting. We will find out. I guess we can just look real quick, huh? Which side does this go? It's the moment of truth. We find out if we're way far off and this all has to come back apart. or if I need to steal the parts out of the other bike, which we might. Looking at this now, probably could have checked these two axles at first as well. So I'm just kind of doing a quick little rough mock-up here. What does this one look like? I don't know if I have the right wheel spacers is the issue. It's backwards. I'm looking at this now, and this definitely has different adjustments on the axle. On the outside, so there's the brake plate. Oh, no, it might just be the brake plate. So that's definitely different. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about in a second. So, rounding into an issue. Here is the brake plate that I have on this bike. This comes over and kicks in a little bit. That's set up to line up on the swing arm. On the stock one, hopefully you guys can see that, this brake plate comes down, hard cut over, and then forward. So I'm basically having to get this over, so when you tighten this down, this lines up on the nub on the swing arm. So it's not that big of a deal. I don't really want to weld anything on the swing arm. I just need a detent to hold that in place. And then we get to figure out where the actual chain and sprocket alignment is going to end up too. But how can we keep going here? Do I want to switch the backer plate? Bummer. I think I'm still going to throw the wheels on and make it a roller, knowing that we got to do some brake plate work here at a later date. The front shouldn't be as bad. This for a little bit, just in terms of the spacers and things. I turned the brake plate arm around. I got to re-tap the end of this, or chase the end of the brake plate for the cable adjuster. And got this pretty much lined up. Now, I do have all the right parts. It will work in this without much, except for this. The brake stay needs to be bent out. So I think I'm going to try and butcher this, and hopefully I don't crack or break any of the powder, because I'm not going to be gentle. But if this was bent out about ½ an inch, it'll work perfect without having to modify anything else. So let's get to bending. All right, so I got the brake plate on here. I don't necessarily want it off yet, and it is thinner steel. So I don't know how strong this is. We can pull it off if I need to, but don't really know. I can use the axle and kind of pry up on it. Nothing good's gonna come out of this. There's a lot of powder on here. Not too bad. Brake plate now. Oh, just pulled all of this apart to grind it and make it fit, and then I forgot about the brake plate. So, we'll lift this up and get this lined up in the notch first. Come on. Come on. Fighting a lot of parts here. Normally, let me just pull the axle nut off. I was going to say it's a lot easier when you only have the center of the axle to line all of this up. Like that. This might actually work. Might have gotten lucky. So now we'll put the axles on here, the adjusters on here. Axle, adjuster, and washer on both sides. Leave both of these here. This 19 mil socket's really starting to annoy me. Okay, side's roughly snugged up. Where do we have the axle set? Somewhere right around here-ish. We're not doing a thing though. There we have it. Look at that. Brake works. Cool. So halfway to roller status. That took way longer than I wanted. And in all honesty, looking at it from the back here, it's pretty centered up. Obviously, we got to throw the chain on and do final adjustments and tweaks, but we're not hitting anything. We got plenty of clearance in between. Wheel spins nice and smooth. Sweet. I'd call that good for now. I meant to start with the front. I'm glad we started with the rear because that is much harder to do than the front wheel. So now we can kind of move on to this one. Same deal. We got the axle adjuster that I didn't change. It should come through on the brake side. So let me grab the other baggie. We'll pound in these cups. Basically duplicate the process, and then we'll set up this after I get the bearings and dust shields reinstalled, because we already did that once. Just repeat. So we're getting ready to fit the front wheel on here now, which is kind of a pain by yourself. That's the easy part, but I gotta make sure I get the forks out far enough to line up the brake plate too. Never easy. This is where a buddy would come in hand. Very much so. Come on. Alright. And I gotta line up the speedo where that's supposed to go. Go. Just like that. And we just need the washer. Clock the speedo a little bit. I might just replace that with spacers at some point too, because I don't think we're going to actually hook up a speedo on this. But there's the front wheel. I just gotta grab a washer for the other side. Put the nuts on and tighten these guys up. Oh, that's why I didn't do this yet. Been racing the fender situation. Keep forgetting that the fender goes on the axles too. So that's fun. A lot of moving parts here. Brake plate's gonna cause a problem for the fender mount too. Why? Why is this my life today? Okay, so fender's not going on yet because we're gonna have to tweak some more stuff. I'll show you guys that in a second. So since we switched the brake plate, this one does have that kick out over here. I don't know if you guys can see what I'm talking about. That kick out right there that cuts in. I really should have just taken the brake plates out of the spoke wheel, but the fender post mounts right here. That's not going to work with this little piece engaged. So I'm just going to throw the wheel on so we at least have something that rolls, and then we're going to have to address that at a later date because I am running out of time. The goal was to make a roller, and I think we still are doing that, even if it's got to come back apart. So I'll throw the fender bolts back in here so I don't lose them. And we'll just throw the nuts on the outside here, snug it down. I like to just compress the forks a little bit to make sure they're fully seated, which they are. Yeah, we got some spacer issues on that brake plate, huh? Bummer. Okay, well, it rolls. Wheel's crooked, but custom things. I'm thinking what we're gonna have to do is steal the brake plate off of the other bike, or the other stock wheel, because this one is not set up the right way. Anyways, that's where we're gonna leave this one off because I'm running out of energy and I got a ton of other stuff to do, but she's a little bit closer. Almost looks like a bike. Thanks for watching. We'll be back in the next day or two. So pretty. Catch you guys later.